Winter deepens, and with it the stakes. In a city held by redcoats and ruled by suspicion, every word whispered carries the weight of war. Eliza Kendrick moves with quiet urgency, deciphering secrets, chasing shadows, and stepping closer to a truth that could shatter what little peace remains. But as maps are drawn and names exposed, loyalty is no longer just a virtue. It is a weapon, and some blades cut deeper than betrayal. The safe house was no more than a cellar beneath an abandoned apothecary near the East River. The air was damp and tinged with mildew, the floor strewn with straw that hadn't been replaced in weeks. A lantern burned low, its light barely enough to push back the dark corners. Eliza crouched near the stone wall, wrapping her hands around a mug of water gone tepid. Her hair, usually pinned and discreet, hung loose over one shoulder, its curls pulled down by dampness and fatigue. Her coarse wool shawl barely held off the chill. Across the room, Thomas Alden knelt beside a rickety table, spreading out the coated map they'd nearly died retrieving. His red coat was gone, replaced with a rough civilian cloak, and the flickering lantern made shadows dance across the scar at his temple, a faint silvery line she hadn't noticed before. They hadn't spoken since the boy died. Not really. Not about what mattered. She set her mug down and stood. "It's not safe here for long. They'll start searching the warehouses by dawn." "I know." His voice was low, controlled, but the weight of fatigue lingered there. "I've marked 2 alternate routes. If we move before first light, we might avoid the patrols on the west side." Eliza moved to his side. The map was smudged from water and blood. She reached out, brushing the edge of the parchment with her fingers. "We can't afford might, Thomas." He looked up, really looked at her. Not as a courier, not as a shadow, but as a woman standing with the weight of too many lives on her shoulders. "You never flinch," he said quietly. "Even now." "I do," she whispered, "just not where anyone can see." A pause, then, "I was wrong about you." "You were right. About some things. I am good at disappearing. But I don't want to disappear from this war without doing something that matters." Thomas stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded scrap of parchment. "This message was written by the rebels, one of their own. It was intercepted by British scouts near White Plains. It confirms what I feared. Someone high in the rebel ranks is feeding information to the Crown. There's a name on here, but it's in cipher." She took it from him. The paper was creased and brittle at the edges. The ink faded, but the symbols were familiar. Variations on a code she'd seen months earlier in Philadelphia. "If I can break this," she said slowly, "we'll know who's betraying us, and where they'll strike next." They both looked at the map again. Names, routes, dates, the war laid bare. She didn't ask how he had it. She didn't ask what it cost him. She simply nodded. "I'll need ink," she said, and silence. He rose and crossed to the far wall, retrieving a satchel. "There's a writing kit inside, and jerky. Not much, but it'll keep us going." Eliza took it without a word. They were past thank yous now. As she sat again near the flickering lantern, Thomas stood watch at the door. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of shared purpose, of danger coiled tight like wire. Outside, the city held its breath, and underground, a woman with ink-stained hands prepared to crack a code that might tip the scales of a nation's war. She remembered the hold of the prison ship, how it had stunk of old water, rot, and despair. Rusted chains had clinked with the pitch and roll of the vessel, and even the rats had begun to starve. She had sat with her knees drawn to her chest, back against a damp beam, listening to the shallow breaths of men who'd once been soldiers and now barely resembled men at all. Her eyes had settled on Nathaniel, and the memory pulled at her like a tide. Eliza Kendrick had not always been a courier. Before she became a shadow in alleyways and a whisper between outposts, she was his wife. They had been married 4 years, a teacher before the war, quiet in manner, sharp in wit. Nathaniel Kendrick had not been built for battle, but he had enlisted anyway, not for glory, but for principle. He had believed in liberty as one believed in God, fully, fervently, with a kind of aching hope. He'd read Locke and Montesquieu beside her in bed, quoting them between kisses like scripture. He had kissed her slowly the night before he left, and told her that ideas only mattered if someone was willing to bleed for them. When the army had called for volunteers for a doomed winter campaign, he had stepped forward. When his unit was cornered near the Hudson, he had surrendered, believing, perhaps naively, that officers still honored the old codes. He had been put on that prison ship in chains, and not long after, the fever had come. That night in the dark, he had one last moment of clarity. "Eliza," he had rasped, barely louder than the creak of wood. She had crawled to his side, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "I'm here. You remember what we said we'd do after the war?" Her throat had tightened. "You promised we'd farm the Western Valley. Grapes, if the soil was kind." He had smiled faintly. "You wanted books and quiet. I wanted you. Still do." She had fought the tremor in her hands. "Then live. Hold on." He had shaken his head slowly. "It's not me that matters now. It's the cause. You have the gift, Eliza. You see things. Move pieces others don't know exist. Don't waste that. I just wanted you. And I wanted to give you more time. But if I die, and it pushes you towards something greater," he had coughed, the sound raw, "then I'll die in peace." She had leaned her forehead against his. "You don't get to make that choice for me." His hand had tightened weakly around hers. "I already did." The candle had burned low beside them. Hours later he had slept. By morning he was gone. Eliza had never cried. She had packed her grief into steel and strategy. From that day on, her loyalty was not just to the revolution. It was to the fire Nathaniel left behind in her. The candle had burned low, its wax puddling into the tin saucer. Eliza sat cross-legged in the dust, the cipher sheet propped between 2 bricks. Her fingers were ink-stained, her eyes bloodshot from hours of scanning, scribbling, crossing out. She had always loved patterns, the way a poem rhymed with its own rhythm, the balance of a well-spoken sentence. Ciphers were not chaos. They were language disguised, truth buried in logic. Across the room, Thomas dozed with his back against the wall, one hand on the hilt of his knife. Every so often he twitched. Dreams, no doubt. Memories, more likely. Eliza murmured this sequence aloud. C-A-F. Repeats every 7th line. Shifted 3 places? No, 2. She adjusted her page. The message emerged like a ghost surfacing from fog. Someone within the general circle. Initials JM. The next move is Philadelphia. Her breath caught. The ink blurred. JM. The initials struck like a hammer. She had seen them before, neatly pinned across manifests and tucked into the corners of shipping logs. Always just JM. Never a full name, never a face she could confidently match to the signature. But the mark had come to feel familiar. The bureaucratic ghost of someone efficient, polite, unremarkable. She remembered one spring afternoon in the quarter. A man had offered her tea, quoted Virgil, and smiled like the war had spared him. Could it have been him? Thomas. He awoke instantly, eyes narrowing as he saw the look on her face. You cracked it? She nodded. The message warns of a traitor. Someone close to the command, initials JM. The next target, it's Philadelphia. Thomas crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside her, eyes scanning the deciphered lines. J.M. James Monroe? She asked, then quickly dismissed it. No, he's too public, too watched. This is someone who moves quietly, a name that would never raise suspicion. They sat still in the silence that followed. Not relief, not yet. This kind of knowledge didn't end wars. It lit fuses. She folded the page and pressed it into his hand. We need to get this to my contact in the quarter. If it reaches the wrong ears... He nodded. Then we move. Before dawn. As she gathered her things, Eliza looked once more at the paper. The cipher cracked. The truth revealed. And in the pit of her stomach, she felt it. This was only the beginning. They moved through the side streets of the city like ghosts, hoods drawn, boots silent on frostbitten cobblestones. Dawn was still a rumor, and the fog curling off the East River thickened their silence. They didn't speak of the initials again, not yet, not until the quarter. Eliza led them to a boarded-up store wedged between a tavern and a chapel. She tapped twice on the rear door, paused, then tapped once more. A slit opened. No words, just a grunt and the scrape of a bolt. Inside, candlelight revealed a narrow room with shelves of dust-covered bottles and crates stacked like coffins. A man emerged from the shadows, older, calloused hands, and spectacles fogged with cold. Gideon Webb, Eliza's courier contact. You shouldn't be here, he said. It's not safe. It's never safe, she replied, handing him the folded cipher. Gideon's eyes scanned the page. As he read, his expression tightened. This can't be right. Thomas spoke for the first time. Do you know who J.M. is? Gideon nodded slowly, reluctantly. Jonathan Marks, quartermaster under General Wayne. Keeps records, shipping manifests, requisitions, everything. He's a ghost in plain sight. Eliza closed her eyes. I knew it. Jonathan Marks. He'd always lingered in the periphery, never quite important enough to be remembered, yet always present at critical moments. He worked quietly as an aide to the quartermaster's office, efficient and dull by design. But Eliza had noticed his handwriting on more than a few manifests, seen him load supply carts he wasn't assigned to, and once overheard him speaking fluent French to a supposed Portuguese merchant. He moved like someone who'd spent years not being watched. He was always just there, she murmured, mostly to herself. Never too much, never too little. Enough to be useful, enough to be invisible. Thomas nodded slowly. The best kind of spy. The kind no one remembers. She stepped back from the table. He's close to the rebel command. He knows the codes, the routes. If he's meeting someone in Philadelphia, it's not just a handoff. It's the beginning of something larger. He's been in and out of the city 3 times this month, Gideon continued. Said it was for supply routes. I didn't question it. You weren't supposed to, Thomas said grimly. That's the point. A long pause hung between them. Then Gideon stepped back and retrieved a sealed letter from beneath the loose floorboard. I was told to pass this to anyone if anything ever pointed to Marks. It came weeks ago. No signature. He handed it to Eliza. She broke the seal with her thumbnail. Inside was a single line. He plays both sides, but his loyalty is for sale. Follow the gold. Eliza looked at Thomas. Philadelphia. He nodded once. We stop him before he gets there. Gideon added, There's a merchant vessel leaving at dusk. It's not meant for passengers, but I can get you aboard. Thomas tucked the cipher and the letter into his coat. Do it. As they turned to leave, Gideon caught Eliza's wrist. You're stepping into a fire, girl. I know, she said. They disappeared into the mist again, carrying treason folded between pages, in the name of a man whose betrayal could change the course of a war. Thomas laid the decoded letter back on the table with deliberate care, as though it might shatter if touched too quickly. The candle beside them had burned low, its wax pooled and trembling. We can't go straight to General Gates, Eliza said, pacing the narrow room. Not without proof. If Marks vanishes before we reach him, he'll vanish into history, Thomas finished, and take half the war effort with him. She nodded grimly. We have one shot. He'll be in Philadelphia 2 nights from now. If he's meeting someone, they'll expect privacy. Nightfall, perhaps. Somewhere discreet. Thomas stepped to the window, pushing the curtain aside with 2 fingers. Outside, the alley flickered with lantern light. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, a church bell marked the hour. Eliza, he said without turning. This path, once we start down it, there's no return. She joined him, arms crossed. You think I haven't already burned that bridge? No, he said softly. I think you built it knowing you'd have to. They stood in silence for a long moment, the kind of silence that held all the things they hadn't yet said. You could disappear after this, he offered. Go north. New Hampshire, maybe. Find some peace. I wouldn't know what to do with peace. Thomas turned to face her fully. Then what do you want? Her eyes held his. I want the truth to matter. He stepped closer, not touching her, but not far. You remind me of someone I used to be. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Then maybe you're not lost yet. They held each other's gaze until the knock came. 3 soft raps. Eliza moved first, snuffing the candle with her fingers. Thomas drew his pistol and crossed the room. The door creaked open to reveal a courier, no older than 17, his eyes wide with cold and fear. He handed Thomas a slip of folded parchment. No words, just the look of a boy who knew too much. Thomas read it. His face hardened. They're moving the meeting up. Tomorrow night. Independence Hall. Eliza exhaled slowly. Then we leave at first light. The room smelled faintly of pipe ash and old ink. A cracked oil lamp cast flickering light over the warped table where Eliza and Thomas hovered. bent over a spread of maps and correspondence that stretched from Philadelphia to the Delaware River Basin. Eliza marked 3 spots with a charcoal stub, her gloved hand steady. If he meets them in the square, his best escape is north, here, through the alleys near 2nd Street. These are loyalist-guarded buildings. Thomas circled another. And if he suspects we know? He'll improvise. Mark's always favored plans with multiple exits. She pulled a second note from the satchel. Handwriting matched to the intercepted cipher. This one was written in haste. There's ink smudged along the edge. He must have sent it from the field. Thomas raised a brow. He's nervous. They both stood straight up at the same time, meeting each other's eyes. Thomas drew a deep breath. We'll need a distraction. Something loud enough to shake the meeting without scaring them off. I can speak to Reeve, Eliza offered. He owes me a favor. 2, actually. A wry smile flickered over Thomas's face. Well, then I think it's time you collect. She leaned forward, pressing her palms to the table. We split up once we crossed the bridge. I'll take the east side. You watch the hall. Thomas nodded. If we miss him? We won't. He hesitated. Eliza. Yes? His expression softened. You've never asked for safety, only for truth. And I don't know which one scares me more. She gave a ghost of a smile. Then be afraid, but follow me anyway. A silence passed, not weighted, but familiar. Then they folded the map, snuffed the lamp, and vanished down separate stairs. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the carriage pulled away from the inn, wheels whispering over frost-slick cobblestone. Fog clung to the streets like breath on glass, veiling the city's morning stirrings in a pale gray silence. Inside the cabin, Eliza sat opposite Thomas, a wool cloak drawn tight around her shoulders. Between them lay a leather satchel, its contents, copies of the intercepted letter, notes on Jonathan Marks, and a hastily drawn map of the area around Independence Hall, resting like the fate of a nation. They did not speak for miles. Thomas stared out the window, jaw set, eyes shadowed by a sleepless night. Eliza watched him quietly, studying the lines carved into his face, not by age, but by decision. Regret, perhaps, or resolve. He taught me how to lie, she said suddenly. Thomas turned. Who did? Marks. Her voice was low, bitter. When I was brought into the network, he trained me, taught me how to blend, how to hold a secret behind my teeth. And all that time, he was keeping one of his own. Thomas said nothing, but his hand tightened slightly on the edge of the seat. After Nathaniel died, she continued, I nearly left the work, but Marks convinced me to stay, said I had too much clarity to waste. God help me, I believed him. The carriage hit a rut, jostling them. I'm sorry, Thomas said finally. Eliza looked up. For what? For what this will cost you. Seeing him again, confronting it. She exhaled, steadying herself. This war has already cost me everything. If I can buy back even a sliver of truth with what's left of me, I will. The carriage slowed. Thomas peered out. We're close. About a half mile from the square. Eliza nodded. Thomas checked his pistol before sliding it back beneath his coat. The carriage door opened to the wind. They stepped into the chill, the silence between them speaking more than words ever could. If you've not heard part 1, now's the time. The blade was drawn then, and here it cuts deeper still. This is part 2, Crossroads. The road to Philadelphia is lined with more than frost and silence. It winds through betrayal, through the fragile space between duty and trust. And somewhere ahead waits the man who once sat at Eliza's table, Jonathan Marks, now enemy, now target. In a city poised for war, one truth will change everything. Part 3 arrives next Thursday. Until then, trust no one and carry nothing you can't burn.